If you look at a map of the United States today, you see this massive country, right? Stretching from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific.
A real continental powerhouse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it didn't start that way. It was, just a narrow line of 13 states pretty much clinging to the East Coast.
And our deep dive today is all about that transformation. How did the U.S. go from that coastal strip to the nation you see now?
We're going to look at the core ideas and the major events that fueled that expansion.
And crucially, what the real cost of all that growth was.
Right. So to understand any of it, the land deals, the long journeys, the wars, you really have to start with one single concept that drove everything.
Manifest destiny.
Manifest destiny.
Yeah, and this wasn't a law or some official policy. It was a cultural belief, a feeling that just swept the nation in the 19th century.
So what did it actually mean?
In short, it was the belief that American settlers were, well, destined, some even said by God, to expand across all of North America.
So from the Atlantic to the Pacific, that was the goal.
That was the goal. And people really believed this was not only inevitable, but that it was justified. They felt they had a special mission to spread their democratic values and their way of life.
So it became this powerful justification for moving west.
Incredibly powerful. It gave people this huge motivation. But here's the critical part you have to remember.
Okay.
This idea of manifest destiny, it completely ignored the rights and the cultures of the people who were already living in those Western lands.
You mean the Native American tribes and Mexican citizens?
Exactly. So understanding that mindset, that they believed their expansion was fundamentally good, is really the key to understanding this entire era.
Got it. And with that mindset, the first huge step happens pretty early on, 1803.
The Louisiana Purchase.
Let's talk about the scale of this.
Yeah.
The Louisiana Purchase was just enormous. The U.S. bought this huge piece of land from France.
And it instantly doubled the size of the country. I mean, just like that overnight.
The strategic impact must have been massive.
Oh, you can't overstate it. It wasn't just about the land for settlement. It secured two incredibly vital assets.
Which were?
The port of New Orleans and complete control of the Mississippi River.
And why was the Mississippi so crucial?
Well, think about the economy back then. It was almost all farming. So if you're a farmer in, say, Kentucky or Ohio, you need a way to get your crops to market.
And the river was basically their highway.
It was their highway. Controlling the Mississippi meant goods could flow down to New Orleans and then out to the rest of the world. It made the entire interior of the country economically viable.
And of course, once you own all that land, you have to figure out what's actually there.
Right, which is why President Thomas Jefferson immediately sent out Lewis and Clark.
The core of discovery.
To map it, document everything they found, and they hoped find a water route all the way to the Pacific.
And that expedition really set the stage, didn't it? It showed that the U.S. was serious about becoming a continental power.
Absolutely. It set a precedent for buying land from other countries.
So with all that new territory secured, the next logical step for people who believed in manifest destiny was, what? Reaching the Pacific Ocean.
Exactly. And that's where we get to the Oregon Trail. This is where it shifts from the government buying land to individual people making this grueling journey.
Thousands of pioneers, right?
Yeah.
Starting in the 1840s.
Yeah, and we're talking about a brutal trip, over 2,000 miles, and it would often take 5 or 6 months to complete.
And they were in those big covered wagons, but they weren't pulled by horses usually.
No, usually slow-moving oxen or mules. And people didn't really ride in the wagons much. They walked alongside them. The wagons were just packed with all their supplies.
They must have faced incredible dangers.
Everything. Flash floods, diseases like cholera, which were just devastating, and the constant threat of running out of food.
Which is why they traveled in those wagon trains for support.
Right, they had to stick together to survive. It's amazing that despite all that hardship, the dream of owning their own land kept them going.
So all this is happening up north. There's a lot of drama unfolding down south, in Texas.
Which was, at the time, still part of Mexico.
Right, and Mexico had actually encouraged Americans to settle there.
They did. They offered cheap land, mostly to cotton farmers, but there were strings attached. Settlers had to become Mexican citizens, and most importantly, they had to give up slavery, which was illegal in Mexico.
And that didn't go over well with the American settlers.
Not at all. Tensions just kept growing over laws, control, and especially slavery. It eventually led to a revolution.
And Texas won its independence, becoming its own country for about 10 years.
The Republic of Texas, it had its own government, its own military, but the U.S. was always watching, wanting to add that territory.
And in 1845, it did. the U.S. annexed Texas.
A huge move that expanded the country's southern border, but it was also explosive.
Why so explosive?
Because Mexico had never actually recognized Texas's independence. They still saw it as a rebellious province.
So when the U.S. annexed it,
Mexico saw it as an act of war, and that tension led directly to the Mexican-American War.
this is where manifest destiny really shifts from an idea into a full-blown military campaign.
It is. The war lasted from 1846 to 1848, and it was a decisive victory for the U.S. American troops actually captured Mexico City.
And the peace treaty was just devastating for Mexico.
The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo.
Yeah.
The U.S. paid a relatively small amount of money, but in return, Mexico had to give up a massive part of its northern territory.
We're talking about the land that is now California, Nevada, Utah.
And big parts of Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Wyoming. Just a staggering amount of land.
So with that treaty, the U.S. now officially stretched from coast to coast. The continental dream was complete.
It was. The U.S. was now the dominant power in the region, without a doubt.
And then, almost immediately, something happens that changes everything all over again.
Gold.
Gold is discovered in California in 1848.
Yeah, right as the war was ending. And it sparked the California gold rush. People came from all over the world in 1849.
The 49ers.
Exactly. And the change was immediate. San Francisco went from a tiny little village to a chaotic, booming city almost overnight.
But the reality for most of the miners wasn't so great.
Not at all. Mining was incredibly hard work, and very few people actually got rich. Most of them spent everything they had just to get there.
But the long-term effect was that massive population boom, which let California become a state much faster than anyone expected.
Right. So now the U.S. has the map. It stretches across the continent. But owning the land is one thing. Unifying it is a whole other challenge.
How do you connect a country that takes months to cross by wagon?
The answer was technology, a revolution in transportation and communication.
First up was steam power.
Steam engines on boats were a huge deal because they could travel upriver against the current. It made river trade a two-way street for the first time.
But the real game changer was the railroad.
Without a doubt, the Transcontinental Railroad. It was this incredible engineering project that connected the East and West coasts.
And suddenly a journey that took 6 months by wagon took,
Right.
what, a week?
A matter of days. And you can imagine what that did for settlement, but also for the economy. A farmer in Nebraska could now sell his crops in New York.
And communication followed right alongside the tracks.
Yeah, they built telegraph lines with the railroad. So news that used to take months to travel could now be sent instantly. It truly tied the country together.
So while technology is connecting the coasts, the government has a plan to fill in that huge middle part, the Great Plains.
The Homestead Act of 1862.
Which was a pretty incredible deal.
It was. The government offered 160 acres of free land to anyone who would live on it and farm it for 5 years.
And millions of people took them up on it. Poor families, immigrants.
But life on the plains was so much harder than they imagined. For one thing, there were almost no trees.
Which means no wood to build houses.
Right, so they had to build their homes out of sod. Literally blocks of dirt and grass.
Plus the extreme weather, and the soil itself was incredibly tough to farm.
It was. They had to invent new tools like the steel plow just to break up the ground. It was that combination of government policy and pure innovation that turned the plains into America's agricultural heartland.
So we've talked about the land, the technology, the settlement.
Yeah.
But we have to talk about the human cost of all of this.
Absolutely. Because for all the opportunity it created for some, this expansion was a catastrophe for the people who were already there.
The Native American tribes.
As settlers moved west, they came into direct conflict with tribes who had lived on that land for centuries.
And the U.S. government's policy was to force them to sign treaties.
Treaties that took away huge amounts of their ancestral land. And often, those treaties weren't even honored.
Many tribes were forced onto smaller, less desirable areas of land called reservations.
Which made their traditional way of life impossible. One of the most devastating things was the destruction of the buffalo herds.
Which was deliberate.
It was a deliberate military tactic. The buffalo was central to the Plains tribe's way of life, for food, shelter, everything. By encouraging the slaughter of the buffalo, the government aimed to destroy their ability to resist.
It's just a tragic, profound cost of this whole era.
It is. And at the same time, this expansion was making a huge internal problem even worse.
The issue of slavery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Every single time a new piece of territory was added, this massive debate would explode in Washington.
Is it going to be a free state or a slave state?
Right, because it was all about the balance of power in the Senate. If one side got more states, they could control the whole country's laws on slavery.
And Congress kept trying to make these compromises, but it just wasn't working.
No, the tension just got more and more intense with every new territory. In a way, westward expansion actually sped up the arrival of the Civil War. It forced the issue.
Okay, so just to wrap up the map making, the very last piece of the puzzle in the contiguous U.S. comes in 1853.
The Gadsden Purchase. It was a pretty small strip of land in what's now southern Arizona and New Mexico, bought from Mexico.
And this one wasn't about some grand vision, was it? It was practical.
Purely practical.
Yeah.
They needed a flat route to build a southern railroad line through the mountains, and that land was perfect for it. And it settled the last of the border disputes.
So when you look back at this whole era, what's the legacy?
Well, Manifest Destiny completely transformed the United States. It gained incredible natural resources and became a true continental power, which set the stage for it to become a global power.
But that legacy is, well, it's very complicated. It's a story of innovation and incredible resilience.
But it was all purchased at a profound cost. The dispossession of Native Americans and the deepening crisis over slavery. And the consequences of those things are still with us today.
Manifest Destiny really did shape the country's geography and its identity, creating a nation built on both amazing ambition and deep moral compromise.
That tension, that push for a perceived mission versus the reality of what it cost, is something to really think about as you study this history.
Good luck with your studies.
Yep.